These hijab-wearing girls should stick to serving coffee, not pretending they understand business," said Marcus Sterling, his voice dripping with contempt as he gestured toward the young Arab waitress refilling his espresso. But the tech billionaire had no idea that 24-year-old Layla Al-Mansouri was about to expose the billion-dollar fraud that would destroy his empire in 48 hours, using nothing but the conversations he thought she couldn't understand. If you want to witness how one man's racist assumptions became the most expensive mistake in Silicon Valley history, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell, because what happens next will leave you speechless. But let's go back to where it all began. The Venetian Club's crystal chandeliers cast golden shadows across mahogany tables where Los Angeles' elite discussed deals worth more than small nations' GDP. Marcus Sterling adjusted his $15,000 Patek Philippe watch as he leaned back in the leather chair that had hosted 3 governors and countless CEOs. At 42, he commanded Sterling Dynamics with a ruthless precision that had built his fortune for Stanford dorm room to a $3.2 billion empire spanning artificial intelligence, defense contracts, and cryptocurrency mining. Layla Al-Mansouri moved through the dining room with practiced invisibility, her black hijab and modest uniform rendering her nearly transparent to the power brokers who shaped California's economy. She'd perfected the art of being overlooked during her 18 months at the Venetian Club, serving overpriced coffee to men who spent more on lunch than her family earned in a month. The irony wasn't lost on her. These titans of industry never noticed the woman who heard their most confidential conversations, who witnessed handshake deals worth hundreds of millions, who cleaned up after meetings that violated more federal regulations than a cartel summit. The beauty of shell companies, Sterling continued to his lunch companion, venture capitalist Robert Shun, is that the SEC can't trace funds through 15 different offshore accounts, especially when half the paperwork is filed in Arabic. He gestured dismissively toward Layla as she approached their table, like asking this one to audit Goldman Sachs. They literally can't read the documents. Layla's hand trembled almost imperceptibly as she set down Sterling's espresso. Her master's degree in international finance from Georgetown meant she understood every word of his money laundering confession. Her fluent Arabic, English, French, and Mandarin meant she'd been documenting his crimes in 4 languages for 6 months. But Sterling saw only what his prejudices allowed, a hijab-wearing server who belonged in his peripheral vision, not his calculations. The new defense contract comes through next week. Sterling lowered his voice to what he assumed was a confidential whisper. $40 million from the Pentagon for AI weapons systems that don't exist. We'll route the funds through Dubai, then back into Sterling Dynamics as research investments. Clean money, legal profits, and those sand people think they're investing in legitimate technology. Chen shifted uncomfortably, glancing around the nearly empty dining room. "Marcus, maybe we should discuss this in your office." "Relax," Sterling laughed, his voice carrying across polished marble floors. "Look around. Old money wasps who wouldn't know fraud if it bit their trust funds, and service staff who can barely speak English. We're invisible here." Layla refilled Chen's water glass with steady hands while memorizing every detail. The Pentagon contract, Dubai routing, Sterling Dynamics fabricated research division. Each revelation added another count to the federal indictment she'd been building in her mind, another piece of evidence for the FBI investigation she'd been secretly feeding for 2 months. The cryptocurrency mining operation in Syria is particularly brilliant, Sterling continued, oblivious to the woman documenting his confession 3 feet away. "We're funding both sides of their civil war through blockchain transactions, then mining the chaos for profit. When your enemy destroys each other's infrastructure, energy costs drop to nothing." The words hit Layla like physical blows. Her cousin Amira lived in Aleppo. Her uncle's family had fled Damascus 2 years ago. Sterling wasn't just committing financial fraud. He was profiting from her people's suffering, turning her homeland's tragedy into cryptocurrency margins while mocking Arabic speakers as illiterate savages. "Sir," Layla's voice was soft, respectful, perfectly calibrated to blend in a background noise. "Would you like another espresso?" Sterling barely glanced up from his phone, where he was reviewing stock portfolios that included weapons manufacturers and private military contractors. "Whatever. Just don't interrupt when adults are talking." The dismissal was automatic, casual, devastating. Layla nodded with practiced deference while calculating the precise moment for her revelation. Not yet. Not here. Sterling's empire needed to collapse publicly, spectacularly, with maximum witnesses and minimum escape routes. The Syrian operation nets us about 12 million monthly, Sterling told Shun, his voice now relaxed with assumed privacy. Blood money laundered through blockchain, then invested in clean California real estate. The beauty is that every transaction looks legitimate on paper. Layla cleared their dessert plates with invisible efficiency, while Sterling described funding terrorist networks, bribing Pentagon officials, and manipulating cryptocurrency markets from his Beverly Hills penthouse. Each word was recorded in her perfect memory, each confession documented in multiple languages, each crime cataloged for the reckoning that would reshape Silicon Valley's understanding of justice. Her phone vibrated softly, a text from FBI Special Agent Sarah Martinez requesting their next meeting. Layla had 18 months of evidence, for languages worth of documentation, and a billionaire who just confessed to enough federal crimes to earn 3 life sentences. But Sterling still saw only what his racism allowed. A quiet Arab girl, whose presence barely registered in his world of privileged assumptions. These people should really learn their place, Sterling muttered as Layla walked away, his voice carrying just enough volume to ensure she heard every word. Hijabs in America. It's like bringing medieval thinking into the modern world. Layla's steps never faltered. Her expression never changed. Her hands never shook. But behind her dark eyes, justice was calculating compound interest on 48 hours of carefully orchestrated revenge. Sterling Dynamics stock price would open Monday morning at $847 per share. By Tuesday evening, Marcus Sterling would be begging for the kind of mercy he'd never shown to the Arab girl who'd been listening to his secrets all along. FBI Special Agent Sarah Martinez sat in her unmarked sedan outside the Venetian Club, monitoring Layla's wire feed through noise-canceling headphones. 18 months of investigation had led to this moment. A Silicon Valley titan confessing to federal crimes while assuming his server couldn't comprehend basic English. Martinez's fingers moved across her tablet, transcribing Sterling's admissions in real time as her star informant collected evidence with surgical precision. Crypto mining revenue from Syrian conflict zones, check. Pentagon contract fraud, documented. International money laundering through Dubai shell companies, recorded. Martinez whispered in her throat mic, Layla, you're building the case of the century. Inside the club's mahogany-paneled dining room, Sterling's arrogance had reached dangerous levels. Chin had left 30 minutes ago, visibly uncomfortable with his partner's loose lips and casual racism. But Sterling remained, emboldened by expensive scotch and the intoxicating power of assumed superiority. He'd ordered another round of drinks and begun making calls to his criminal network, treating Layla's presence like ambient noise. Ahmed, it's Marcus. Sterling spoke into his encrypted phone in deliberately loud English, knowing the ignorant Arab girl couldn't possibly understand his business. The Damascus operation needs to scale up. Double the mining rigs, triple the energy theft from refugee camps. If locals complain, remind them who controls their electricity grid. Layla polished wine glasses at the adjacent service station, her movements rhythmic and invisible, while Sterling casually ordered the exploitation of her people's desperation. Every word burned through her professional composure, each command adding federal charges to an indictment that would reshape white-collar crime prosecution. She thought of her cousin Amira, 19 years old, and studying medicine in Aleppo by candlelight because power grids have been compromised by men like Sterling. Sir, would you prefer the 2015 Bordeaux or the 2018 Burgundy? Layla approached with the wine menu, her voice carrying perfect submission, while her mind calculated the precise moment for maximum impact. Not yet. Let him confess more. Let witnesses arrive. Let his empire grow too confident to defend itself. Sterling barely glanced at her, his attention focused on stock charts showing Sterling Dynamics at record highs. Whatever's most expensive. It's not my money anyway. Pentagon's buying dinner tonight. He laughed at his own joke, while Layla's hijab concealed the doctoral thesis she'd written on defense contract fraud at Georgetown. Her professors would have been proud of this real-world application. The beauty of government contracts, Sterling continued his phone conversation, is that oversight committees can't audit what they can't understand. Arabic documentation, blockchain transactions, refugee camp locations. It's all foreign language to congressional investigators. He gestured dismissively toward Layla, like asking this one to explain quantum computing. They literally lack the intellectual capacity. Martinez's voice crackled through Layla's nearly invisible earpiece. Layla, we have everything we need for federal indictment. Religious discrimination, financial fraud, international money laundering, funding terrorist operations. You can extract whenever ready. But Layla wasn't ready. Not yet. Sterling had humiliated her people, profited from their suffering, and dismissed their intelligence for 18 months. His confession needed witnesses, publicity, maximum psychological damage. Justice required theater, and Layla Al-Mansouri had learned from the masters of Silicon Valley presentation. Marcus, the new investors are here, Sterling's assistant announced from across the dining room. The Saudi delegation is requesting your presence in the private conference room. Sterling's eyes lit up with predatory excitement. Saudi investors meant billion-dollar deals, sovereign wealth funds, and legitimacy for his criminal enterprise. Perfect timing. Tell them I'll be right there. He stood, straightening his $5,000 Italian suit, while Layla cleared his table with practiced invisibility. Remember, he told his phone caller, if anyone asks about Syrian operations, we're providing humanitarian blockchain technology to help refugees. The mining rigs are for digital infrastructure development. Keep the story consistent. Sterling pocketed his phone and headed toward the conference room, where 5 Saudi investors waited with briefcases full of legitimate investment capital. But he paused at Layla's service station, his ego demanding one final demonstration of dominance over the inferior woman who'd witnessed his empire's construction. You know, Sterling said, his voice carrying enough volume for nearby diners to hear, I've been watching you work here for months. Very dedicated, very obedient. That's what I appreciate about your people. You understand hierarchy, you know your place in the natural order. Layla continued polishing crystal glasses, her hands steady despite the rage building behind her respectful facade. Sterling interpreted her silence as validation, proof of his racial superiority and intellectual dominance. I'm about to close a $2 billion deal with some very important people, he continued. Real money, real power, real intelligence. The kind of business that requires actual education, not just... He gestured at her hijab. Religious theater. The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. Nearby diners looked up from their meals, some uncomfortable with Sterling's obvious prejudice, others nodding with shared assumptions about hijab-wearing women and their intellectual limitations. Layla felt their eyes, their judgments, their casual dismissal of her humanity based on fabric and faith. Sir, Layla's voice remained soft, respectful, perfectly calibrated for maximum impact. Before you meet with your investors, perhaps you should know something about the woman who's been serving your table. Sterling paused, confused by the shift in her tone. For the first time in 18 months, the invisible server had spoken without being directly addressed. Her English was suddenly precise, articulate, carrying an authority that didn't match his assumptions about hijab-wearing Arabs and their intellectual capacity. Excuse me. Sterling's voice carried dangerous edge. The natural order was shifting, and predators always sense disruption in established hierarchies. Layla set down her crystal glass and looked directly into Sterling's eyes for the first time since his racist performance had begun. I said, Layla repeated, her voice now carrying the authority of someone who held his empire's destruction in her educated hands. Perhaps you should know exactly who's been listening to your confessions for the past 18 months. Sterling's blood ran cold as the dining room fell silent around them. The crystal chandelier above cast fractured light across Sterling's pale face as the weight of Layla's words settled into his consciousness. The dining room's ambient chatter died completely, replaced by the suffocating silence of a predator realizing he'd walked into a perfectly orchestrated trap. Sterling's hand moved instinctively toward his phone, but Layla's next words froze him in place. My name is Dr. Layla Al-Mansouri, she announced, her voice carrying across marble floors and mahogany panels with crystalline clarity. I hold a Ph.D. in international finance from Georgetown University, a master's degree in criminal justice from George Washington University, and I speak 7 languages fluently. Her hijab, which Sterling had dismissed as medieval thinking, suddenly seemed like camouflage that had concealed a brilliant predator. Sterling's mouth opened wordlessly as his racist assumptions crumbled like sand castles meeting tsunami waves. The quiet, submissive Arab girl who'd served his coffee for 18 months was revealing herself to be more educated than most of his board members, more multilingual than his international legal team, more dangerous than any competitor he'd ever faced. "Impossible," Sterling whispered, his voice cracking like adolescent confidence. You're a waitress. You clean tables. You can barely." But the words died as Layla withdrew a small recording device from beneath her serving apron, its red light blinking with 18 months of documented federal crimes. "I can barely what, Mr. Sterling?" Layla's English was now precise, articulate, carrying the authority of someone who'd written doctoral dissertations on the exact financial crimes he'd been confessing. "Barely understand when you described funding both sides of Syria's civil war? Barely comprehend your Pentagon contract fraud? Barely follow your money laundering through Dubai shell companies?" The Saudi investors emerged from the private conference room, drawn by the commotion in the main dining area. 5 men in expensive suits, carrying briefcases full of legitimate investment capital, now witnessing Sterling's empire collapse in real time. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to horror as they recognized the implications of what they were hearing. "You recorded me?" Sterling's voice rose to a near shriek. "That's illegal. You can't. You don't have a right." Actually, FBI Special Agent Sarah Martinez stepped through the club's entrance, her badge gleaming under chandelier light. "Dr. Al-Mansouri has been operating under federal authority for 18 months. Every conversation you've had in her presence has been legally documented." Sterling's legs gave out as he collapsed back into his leather chair, the same seat where he'd casually discussed profiting from refugee camps suffering and dismissed Arab intelligence as medieval thinking. The irony was devastating. His racist assumptions had blinded him to the most sophisticated federal investigation in Silicon Valley history. "The wire recordings," Martinez continued, approaching with handcuffs, "include detailed confessions of international money laundering, defense contract fraud, cryptocurrency manipulation, and funding terrorist operations in Syria." Dr. Al-Mansouri's documentation spans 4 languages and includes financial analysis that would impress Harvard Business School professors. Layla's phone buzzed with notifications as social media exploded with leaked audio from Sterling's confessions. #Sterling Exposed was trending globally within minutes, his racist comments about hijab-wearing women juxtaposed with revelations about his criminal enterprise. The man who'd assumed intellectual superiority over Arab women was being exposed by the brilliant Arab woman he'd dismissed as invisible. "The Saudi investors you were about to meet," Layla said quietly, "include my uncle, Dr. Abdullah Al-Mansouri, former MIT professor and current advisor to the Saudi Investment Fund. He spent the past 6 months helping FBI investigators understand the blockchain technology you've been using to fund violence in our homeland." Sterling's face turned ashen as he realized the full scope of his destruction. The Saudi delegation wasn't just potential investors. They were witnesses, experts, and family members of the woman whose intelligence he dismissed as impossible. His racist assumptions hadn't just cost him billions. They delivered him directly to the people he'd been exploiting. "My cousin Amira," Layla continued, her voice carrying quiet fury, "the one studying medicine by candlelight in Aleppo. She's graduating next month, despite the infrastructure damage her mining operations caused. Her thesis? Economic Warfare and Humanitarian Consequences, a case study of cryptocurrency exploitation in conflict zones." The dining room was now filled with FBI agents, federal prosecutors, and journalists who'd been alerted by Martinez's team. Sterling Dynamics stock price was plummeting in after-hours trading as news of the arrests spread across financial networks. The empire built on assumed intellectual superiority over inferior peoples was collapsing under the brilliant strategy of the woman he considered too stupid to matter. Dr. Al-Mansouri, one of the Saudi investors, approached with deep respect. "Your family's honor has been restored. This man's crimes against our people will face justice." Sterling watched in horror as the woman he dismissed as medieval received reverence from billionaire investors, while federal agents prepared to destroy his life. These hijab-wearing girls should stick to serving coffee. Layla quoted Sterling's own words back to him, her voice carrying the weight of perfect justice. But perhaps next time, Mr. Sterling, you should remember that intelligence isn't determined by clothing, skin color, or the god someone chooses to worship. Sterling's phone buzzed with emergency calls from his legal team, his board members, his investors. But the man who'd assumed superiority over educated Arab women was now completely at the mercy of the brilliant Arab woman whose intelligence he'd criminally underestimated. The reckoning was just beginning. Sterling Dynamics headquarters buzzed with panic as news of Marcus Sterling's arrest spread through Silicon Valley like wildfire. Security guards escorted FBI agents through executive floors while terrified employees watched their company's stock price crater in real time. The trading floor that had celebrated record profits that morning now resembled a disaster zone, with traders staring at screens showing catastrophic losses and criminal investigations. Sterling sat in federal holding, his $5,000 Italian suit wrinkled and stained with the sweat of absolute terror. The man who dismissed hijab-wearing women as intellectually inferior was now completely dependent on overworked public defenders, while Dr. Layla Al-Mansouri testified before grand juries with the precision of a master surgeon dissecting his criminal empire. The defendants recorded confessions federal prosecutor Janet Morrison announced to gathered media outside the courthouse, include detailed admissions of funding terrorist operations, defrauding Pentagon contracts, and exploiting Syrian refugee camps for cryptocurrency mining. Dr. Al-Mansouri's 18-month investigation represents the most comprehensive financial crime documentation in federal history. CNN's Anderson Cooper led wall-to-wall coverage as audio clips of Sterling's racist assumptions played alongside footage of Layla's Georgetown graduation ceremony. These hijab-wearing girls should stick to serving coffee. Sterling's voice echoed across international broadcasts while viewers saw the brilliant Arab woman he'd underestimated receiving academic honors and FBI commendations. Social media erupted with global outrage and celebration. #JusticeForLayla trended in 12 languages as Muslim women worldwide shared stories of discrimination, underestimation, and eventual triumph over prejudiced assumptions. Sterling's face became a symbol of entitled racism destroyed by the intelligence it had dismissed as impossible. "My daughter called me crying," Sterling's wife Patricia told divorce lawyers in their Beverly Hills mansion. Her classmates are watching videos of her father mocking Muslim women while confessing to funding terrorism. "Marcus destroyed our family's reputation along with his criminal empire." The Saudi investment fund announced a $500 million lawsuit against Sterling Dynamics for fraud, deception, and crimes against Arab peoples. Dr. Abdullah Al-Mansouri, Layla's uncle, led a coalition of international investors demanding complete restitution for Syrian humanitarian damages caused by Sterling's cryptocurrency operations. This case demonstrates how racism blinds predators to their own vulnerabilities. Dr. Al-Mansouri told Al Jazeera's international audience, "My brilliant niece used Sterling's prejudices against him, allowing his assumptions about hijab-wearing women to facilitate his complete destruction." Sterling's former associates scrambled to distance themselves from the toxic empire. Robert Chun held emergency press conferences denying knowledge of criminal activities, while board members resigned in disgrace as federal investigators froze all corporate assets. The Pentagon canceled $2.3 billion in defense contracts, demanding full refunds and criminal prosecution for fraudulent weapons systems that never existed. "I received death threats from Sterling supporters," Layla told FBI debriefers in a secure facility, but also marriage proposals from CEOs who finally understand that intelligence transcends appearance. Her calm professionalism contrasted sharply with Sterling's breakdown videos circulating online, showing a once powerful billionaire reduced to sobbing about unfair treatment and reverse discrimination. The Venetian Club faced federal investigation for allowing discriminatory harassment on their premises. Staff members testified about Sterling's routine racism, while Layla's colleagues praised her professionalism despite enduring months of degrading assumptions about her intellectual capacity. Dr. Al-Mansouri's doctoral thesis on financial crime detection, Georgetown University's dean announced, will become required reading for federal investigators and business school students. Her fieldwork methodology represents a breakthrough in undercover financial investigation. Sterling's cryptocurrency mining operations in Syria were shut down by international authorities, restoring power grids to refugee camps and hospitals. Layla's cousin Amira sent a video message from Aleppo. "My classroom has electricity for the first time in 2 years, thanks to my brilliant cousin who never forgot our suffering while serving coffee to our oppressor." The man who'd assumed intellectual superiority over hijab-wearing Arabs now faced life imprisonment, while the woman he dismissed as medieval received international recognition for sophisticated federal investigation work. His empire's $3.2 billion valuation had evaporated completely, transformed into legal settlements for the Arab communities he'd exploited. Federal marshals prepared Sterling for transportation to maximum security prison, where white-collar criminals faced the same brutal justice system that had imprisoned countless Arab men on far less evidence than his recorded confessions. The irony was perfect. His assumed superiority over Arab intelligence would be tested by Arab inmates who'd studied his case files with doctoral-level precision. Sterling's last free breath carried the bitter taste of absolute defeat, while Dr. Layla Al-Mansouri prepared for interviews with international media outlets eager to document how one brilliant Arab woman had orchestrated the complete destruction of Silicon Valley's most arrogant racist. The revolution would be broadcast worldwide. 6 months after Marcus Sterling's arrest, the Venetian Club had been transformed into the Al-Mansouri Center for Economic Justice, funded entirely by liquidated assets from Sterling Dynamics. Dr. Layla Al-Mansouri stood behind the same mahogany podium where Sterling had once mocked hijab-wearing women, now addressing an international conference on financial crime prevention and racial bias in corporate America. Assumptions, Layla told the audience of FBI agents, federal prosecutors, and business leaders, are the greatest vulnerability of criminal enterprises. Marcus Sterling's racism didn't just make him morally bankrupt. It made him strategically blind to the most sophisticated federal investigation in Silicon Valley history. Sterling himself sat in ADX Florence Supermax prison, serving 3 consecutive life sentences for international terrorism, financing, federal fraud, and money laundering. His cellmate, ironically, was Ahmed Hassan, a Syrian-American MIT graduate wrongfully imprisoned for 5 years on terrorism charges before DNA evidence proved his innocence. The brilliant Arab man Sterling had dismissed as inferior now tutored his former oppressor in basic mathematics during their daily exercise periods. "Please understand," Ahmed told visiting journalists, "Marcus Sterling is not evil because he's stupid. He's stupid because he chose to be evil. Intelligence requires humility, curiosity, respect for human dignity. Racism destroys all 3. The cryptocurrency mining operations Sterling had used to exploit Syrian refugee camps were now operated by a coalition of Arab engineers, generating clean energy for hospitals and schools throughout the region. Layla's cousin Amira graduated first in her medical school class, her thesis on economic warfare and humanitarian response becoming required reading at Harvard Medical School. "My cousin Layla proved that justice doesn't require violence," Amira told Al Jazeera from her new clinic in Aleppo. She used Sterling's prejudices like jiu-jitsu. His own assumptions became the force that destroyed him completely. The Saudi Investment Fund established a $2 billion scholarship program for Arab women pursuing advanced degrees in finance, technology, and criminal justice. Dr. Abdullah Al-Mansouri announced that preference will be given to hijab-wearing applicants who'd faced discrimination in Western academic and professional environments. Federal legislation, dubbed the Al-Mansouri Act, now required sensitivity training for all employees in firms holding government contracts. The law specifically protected religious dress, multilingual communication, and cultural practices from workplace discrimination. Violation carried mandatory federal prosecution and corporate dissolution. Dr. Al-Mansouri's methodology, FBI Director Sarah Chin announced, has become the gold standard for long-term undercover financial investigation. "We're training agents worldwide in her techniques for using perpetrator assumptions to facilitate comprehensive evidence collection." Sterling's former mansion was converted into a refugee resettlement center, specifically for Syrian families displaced by conflicts he'd profited from exploiting. The irony was perfect. His Beverly Hills palace now housed the same Arab families he dismissed as intellectually inferior while funding their homeland's destruction. Patricia Sterling published a best-selling memoir titled Married to a Monster: How Racism Destroyed My Family. All proceeds supported Arab women's education through the Al-Mansouri Foundation. "I should have seen the signs," she wrote. "A man who dismisses entire populations as inferior is capable of any evil." The Venetian Club's former staff testified in civil rights lawsuits against dozens of Fortune 500 companies where similar discrimination had been witnessed and ignored. Layla's case opened floodgates of accountability, with hijab-wearing women worldwide finding courage to document and expose workplace bias. Justice, Layla reflected during her final FBI debriefing, isn't about revenge. It's about consequences that prevent future victims. Sterling will spend life in prison not because I hate him, but because his crimes demanded accountability. 3 years later, Dr. Layla Al-Mansouri received the Presidential Medal of Freedom for her contributions to financial crime prevention and civil rights protection. She accepted the award while wearing the same black hijab Sterling had dismissed as medieval thinking, proving that brilliance transcends bigotry and justice eventually humbles arrogance. Sterling died in federal prison at age 57, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about the dangers of racist assumptions. His former employees found new careers in companies that value diversity and intellectual humility over prejudice and assumed superiority. The woman he'd considered too stupid to understand his criminal confessions had become the architect of the most comprehensive financial crime investigation in American history. His assumption that hijab-wearing Arabs lacked intelligence had facilitated his complete destruction by the most brilliant Arab woman he'd ever encountered. At Sterling's funeral, attended only by court-appointed clergy, Dr. Layla Al-Mansouri sent a single white rose with a note: "Intelligence has no uniform. Dignity has no dress code. Justice has no expiration date." The transformation was complete. The real work would continue forever. Marcus Sterling learned too late that underestimating people based on appearance is the most expensive mistake power can make. Dr. Layla Al-Mansouri proved that brilliance disguised as servitude can topple empires built on arrogance. What assumptions are you making about the people serving your coffee today? Share your thoughts below. Subscribe if you believe intelligence transcends appearance. The next Dr. Al-Mansouri is waiting for their moment of justice. Will you recognize her when she arrives?